So this video is a day or two a little later than what I would have liked, but I just wanted to go over and summarize some of the information that was shown on Wednesday, February 8th, Nintendo Direct, the first one for 2023. And I wasn't able to do a video any sooner because I was traveling out of town for work, but I did set time aside on that Wednesday to make sure that I caught it live. And overall, Nintendo likes to give like a wide swath of game announcements to cover a very large audience. I sort of describe it to some of my coworkers as the Super Bowl of video game capitalism, because essentially this is 40 minutes of game advertisements for anything and everything that'll be coming out in the near future and maybe not so near future. So the audience itself that Nintendo plays to, it's kind of a double-edged sword for me personally. As a good amount of what was announced, I tended not to be really that much interested in. So to go through the list here, they first dated Pikmin 4, and that's going to be coming out on July 21st of this year, 2023. And I never really got into the Pikmin series. That was something that Jason the 13th really got into, but they're fun like puzzler games. Next detailed was the Xenoblade Chronicles 3 expansion pass DLC for volumes 3 and 4, I believe. The volume 3 is another hero. It's kind of boilerplate for it, but what really excited me was the brief teaser where it showed Shulk, Giga Chad, Rex, and Noah all coming together for Volume 4 that's coming. I'm excited to see what that's going to be all about. Next is Samba de Amigo, which I think was a Dreamcast type game or series where it's like monkeys or something and like a rhythm game. Didn't really catch my eye or interest. Kind of continuing that trend was Fashion Dreamer. Now, while I was watching the Direct out of town, my wife was as well, and she had texted me at the time saying, ooh, that actually catches my interest. And normally she likes horror games with a little cutesy cat quest and fashion games, so it's an interesting dichotomy. It was not really my cup of tea. Next was the Dead Cells Castlevania DLC, which is really cool to see, but again, this was already announced on the Game Awards December last year. Next up was Tron Identity, and I'm just like, meh. I mean, it looks cool, but I think it's like a adventure game, like a point and click one. I could be totally wrong on that. Further up was Ghost Trick Phantom Detective. Never really got into this when it was on the DS, but I know of a lot of fans of this series online that I'm sure just went nuts over this, and their reactions afterwards were that, yep, that was the case. Next up was Deca Police, which it was an all Japanese dialogue trailer and wasn't really my cup of tea. Again, maybe as more information about it comes out, maybe I might give that a try, especially if there's a demo involved. And then it showed Bayonetta Origins, and this is now dated for I think it's been dated for March 17th, and this is the prequel for the Bayonetta series where it shows her as, I think, like a preteen, and she meets up with a demon type. I think its name was Cheshire. So this looks interesting. It's different from the normal mindless action gameplay loop that the Bayonetta series is famous for. Next up was Splatoon 3's expansion pack, and not into Splatoon at all, and I know the third entry really blew up, especially in Japan, but it's not for me. Jason the 13th really enjoys this series, but again, I tried the first one on the Wii U, and I was just meh. Next, they showed Disney Illusion Island, and I wrote this off when I first saw it, but I think the Illusion series is a callback to like the NES, SNES, and Genesis series of Disney games, where it was Mickey Mouse and the Magical Illusion or something like that. Keeping that in mind, and with it having 4-player co-op platforming gameplay, maybe there's more to this game than I gave it credit for. So that's kind of on my radar. Next up is the Fire Emblem expansion pack, and obviously to me it was a given that Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Splatoon 3, the newest Fire Emblem would get DLC announcement. It's kind of expected. Next up, after that, was Harmony Fall of Reverie, which is an indie-type game for those with the feels. And again, going back to the audience, I noticed Nintendo has often stuff on their directs where it's kind of like that kind of indie feel, and it's going for like a hipster audience vibe, but whatever. Next up was more information about Octopath Traveler 2, which that one I am excited for because that's coming out in just a couple weeks. Just like the first entry, an announcement of a preload demo being released that same day was given out, and so that was pretty cool. Next up was We Love Katamari Reroll, which is yet another Katamari game. Again, Jason the 13th it loves games like this. Not my cup of tea. Never really got into it, but to each their own. Sea of Stars was also shown, and the release date of August 29th was given, which I'm really looking forward to this, because when it first was announced, it was billed as kind of like a Chrono Trigger-esque type game, just like a lot of these indies often like to say that they are, but this one showed more timed-based hits, something like a Super Mario RPG. So really cool to see that the first demo was released that same day. Next up was Omega Strikers, which is this air hockey type free-to-play game, which, at this point with all the live service games kind of going up in smoke right now, and just I'm really not interested in these free-to-play titles, but they're very money heavy for the makers of said games, so to each their own. I'll take a pass. Next up, revealed was the Etrian Odyssey Origins Collection, and I think this was the first 3 games in the Etrian Odyssey series, and this is pretty cool if you're a fan of it. It's like a labyrinthian type RPG where you kind of have the first person view of a maze, and you plot your way through it, and you fight through battles. I never got into this series, but it does look interesting. I want to say this was originally released on the DS and maybe the 3DS, but I'm really glad to see the DS and 3DS games and other more recent consoles see full-fledged remakes come out. And to that end, the Advance Wars 1 and 2 Reboot Camp finally got dated, or redated in this instance, April 21st. And this, of course, was delayed because of the Russia-Ukraine conflict, and how there's a lot of beats to this story that kind of are reminiscent of Russia, I believe, being like the big bad. Either way, I'm really glad to see this finally and hopefully actually get released, because, again, these are remakes of the first 2 Game Boy Advance games, and it's a long-running series. Next up, they showed Kirby's Return to Dreamland Deluxe, specifically a mode for Megalore. He is a character in the Kirby universe. He gets his own story expansion. I never played the original game that this is a remake of, and that one was from the Wii. I may pick this up because, I guess, why not? I have all the Kirby physical games, like Kirby Star Allies and Kirby and the Forgotten Land on the Switch, so I could pick this up. I wouldn't have any issues with that. And then, at this point, 27 minutes of the Direct had gone by, and I was talking to my wife through text. I'm like, it's 2/3 done, and I'm kind of on all this. There's some stuff that was cool, but Then my wife reminded me that, hey, there's still more to go. There still could be 20 minutes left. Then they announced that the Game Boy games and Game Boy Advance games were coming to the NSO and its expansion pack, respectively. And this was something that industry insider Nate the Hate had advised had been done a long time ago. In fact, before Nintendo 64 had been done. But I like the game selection that they have here, but I'm not in love with the fact that there's only 9 Game Boy and Game Boy Color games and 6, because I want to say the Super Nintendo had a lot more at its NSO launch, and the NES did too. And with the Super Nintendo one not getting Super Mario RPG or Chrono Trigger or other stuff like that, I'm not as confident that we're going to see so many of the Game Boy Color and Advance classics, but it at least has the original Tetris, Super Mario Land 2, Gargoyle's Quest, Metroid 2, Kirby's Dream Land, Zelda DX. It's funny, a lot of these beats I just covered on my top 10 Game Boy games. Either many of these were in my list or were honorable mentions. What was cool with the Game Boy Advance one is that it includes Super Mario Advance 4, which is Super Mario Brothers 3, but it also puts in the e-reader content already within the ROM itself. So you're not missing anything by going with this and playing this version. And of course, you really can't go wrong with the Game Boy Advance, including Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga and the Minish Cap. I mean, overall, it is a great selection, but I just wish the number was higher. And the fact that it has the link cable gameplay without actually having to have the link cable, that's pretty awesome. I thought that was a great touch. And to further the hype train for me on this, Metroid Prime Remastered was announced, shown, and shadow dropped. Digitally, the physical version, February 22nd. I had known this was coming for some time, again, thanks to industry insiders like Jeff Grubb and Nate the Hate, but seeing this in action, and I'm about 2 or 3 hours into it myself, I can easily say this is the best version of Metroid Prime. If you haven't gotten this already, I absolutely recommend this. I'll have a review posted on my channel here a little bit later. Next up, they showed Master Detective Archives Rain Code, and didn't really get the whole gist on this one. I was still riding the hype train pretty hard for Metroid Prime, and this one just really didn't interest me as much. Next, they showed the remasters for Baiten Kaitos 1 and 2. They were originally released on the GameCube. I think the first one on the GameCube, the second one on the Wii. And it was like a card-based battle system RPG game. And there were rumors about this remaster that I heard from like other game insiders and everything like that, but it's really cool to see a more not as well-known RPG series get the remake treatment. Next up, they showed another Fantasy Life entry. It's called The Girl Who Steals Time, and again, it's not a Nintendo Direct if it doesn't show a farming type game. Thankfully, unlike the last one, which showed, I think, like 8 farming type games, this is the only one of that, or the particular play type. Next up, they briefly teased Professor Layton and the New World of Steam. I never got into the Professor Layton or the Phoenix Wright series. Again, though, those are two separate things, but I never got into those, so it didn't really interest me. But I had Runjin Run text and reach out to me, showing his excitement for that, so that's cool. They showed more DLC, Wave 4 specifically for Mario Kart 8. It was really cool to see the Yoshi's Island track. It's really a loving homage to that particular game of Yoshi's Island, and they're also adding in Birdo as a character. I hope they continue to add more characters, like where's Diddy Kong in the Mario Kart series? I'm sorry, in this particular Mario Kart 8. I believe he was in previous games like Mario Kart Double Dash and I think Mario Kart Wii. Then it showed a sizzler reel of stuff like Minecraft Legends, Blanc, which is like a Deer and Wolf game, Mega Man Battle Network Collection, a dated Have a Nice Death for the Switch, which was March 22nd, 2023. This one looks cool. It caught my eye before, but both me and my wife are interested in that. WBSC Baseball. Okay. Disney Dreamlight Valley additional content. So that's Nintendo and Disney's agreements kind of going along there. They had to sign Sora to Smash Brothers some way. And then finally, the Tales of Symphonia Remastered, which we already knew about, which will be out in a couple weeks. Then, of course, as anybody predicted, it ended on another Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom trailer. And I'm not overly hyped or excited for this, which is really sad because I love the Zelda series. But in the same way, I'm not overly excited or hyped for Final Fantasy XVI, which is probably my favorite video game series of all time. Simply because Zelda and Final Fantasy were never in doubt or in trouble to have more games in their respective series. It's different for something like Metroid. But anyway, the trailer, the way it shows is it shows the villain talking, and it makes it sound like the villain's coming from the moon. And I'm taking that too literally. It's got to be, because is the moon itself the villain, like in Majora's Mask? I know in Majora's Mask that the moon was a tool of Majora's Mask itself, who was also controlling Skull Kid, but maybe there's something to that. I also noticed at the end, Link catches Zelda from falling with his corrupted-looking hand, And that's important because the second Tears of the Kingdom trailer that was ever released showed Zelda falling down a pit. So does Link catching Zelda in this newest trailer indicate he'll be able to control time, like go back in time somehow, and then that way he can save Zelda? So of course time travel is not anything that's out of bounds at all for the Zelda series. The end of the trailer also had a voice sampling sounding familiar to 5 from Skyward Sword, so I really feel like with them being in the sky, that's probably going to be a lot of callbacks to that. So hopefully all the Zelda fans have played Skyward Sword, the remake, on the Switch, because I feel like we're going to be seeing a lot of those callbacks. And Nintendo took pre-orders for the increased price of $70 for this game. It's the first official one since back in the Super Nintendo era, plus a more expensive collector's edition. They also announced a Link amiibo. Hopefully we'll get a Zelda one. I'm hopeful for a lot of stuff with this game. I'm not, like I said, not super excited because Breath of the Wild, the first one itself, was a masterpiece. I don't know if there's anything that could ever compare closely to that, but here's hoping that this one does. And as mentioned previously, the first 2/3 of the Direct showed off items I was only mildly interested in or was already announced in things like the December Game Awards show. So immediately after watching this, my first impression was to give it a C+. But after looking at the roster of games that they announced, I probably would actually upgrade it to a solid B. Yes, there wasn't a lot of stuff that caught my eye personally, but that doesn't make it any less hype for like video game fans in general. And seeing Runjin Run and my wife and others be so excited for some of the games that just weren't, that I wasn't into at all, like, you know, I think there was something to be had here. And the overall impression from others that I've seen online was that it was a solid A, maybe a B. So take that for what it's worth. I still was hoping against hope that we would see something F-Zero related beyond a little tease that one of the Game Boy Advance games is coming to the Game Boy Advance NSO. Something more akin to a remake of F-Zero GX, but maybe something like F-Zero GX is going to be announced during the summer Nintendo Direct presentation, which is that's very possible. Maybe Nintendo's going to be holding on to that so that they've got something more to keep boomer gamers, I think, because I'm old and I get called a boomer gamer even though I'm a millennial. Whatever labels. Either way, I'm hoping we'll see F-Zero sooner than later. I'm excited to see the lineup here. But what did you think? Did you like the games that were announced during this Direct? Did any of these catch your eye? Did you put in any pre-orders for anything like I did? Because, you know, I'm an idiot, and even though I gave this a B, I still pre-ordered like 3 or 4 games. Again, let me know in the comments below. I'm curious to what you thought about this. And thank you again for watching. I hope everyone has a great day. Please remember to like, subscribe, and ring that bell for notifications.